Hello again, and God be with you. It's nice to be here and to be able to read you another story. I've been enjoying reading stories from Bob Hartman's New Testament tales. And they tell the stories of some of Jesus' miracles from the point of view of the people who were involved, or the people that we imagine were involved. Today's story is the story where Jesus came across a widow who, having already lost her husband, her son had died. And Jesus took compassion on her, and he raised his son from the dead. And this story is told from the point of view of the son. It's called the Dead Boys version. People always ask me two things. What was it like to die? And what was it like to come back to life again? The first question is harder, in a way, because I didn't think I was going to die. I was ill. I had the fever, the shakes, that sort of thing. Don't even know where it came from, really. It just happened. So I didn't really have any time to think about it. I guess if I had, I might have been worried or afraid. Or I might have thought about how unfair it was to die when I was only 13. But I don't remember thinking any of those things. I was hot and shaky, then I sort of fell asleep, and that was it. I just didn't wake up again. I know how my mum felt. At least I know what she told me. She was the one who was worried, mainly because my dad had died of a fever, and she had seen the symptoms before. She didn't say anything, of course, because she didn't want to scare me, but she was scared, really scared. And she was the one who thought it was unfair. She'd already lost her husband, and now it looked as if she might lose her son. So she had a word with God. That's what she told me. And she explained to him how wrong she thought it would be. I died, of course. And she said that she wasn't just sad, she was angry too. Angry at God for not making me well. And she was even angry at the friends and relatives who came to pay their respects. Angry that they still had sons and husbands to bring with them. I don't think she said anything to them. I mean, they've never said anything to me about that, but she was angry. I know that. I think she was also angry that she didn't have any money to pay for the funeral and that she had to rely on those same friends and relatives to help her out. You'd think she would have been pleased that they were there for her, but I think it was a pride thing. Without a husband, she was already poor, and without a son, well, she would pretty much have to depend on charity for the rest of her life. It's not how you plan for things to work out, is it? Anyway, there she was in the funeral procession, angry and sad and poor and hopeless, all at the same time. And I was there too, well, obviously, bouncing around in my open coffin as my uncles and cousins carried me to my grave. There was a huge crowd. I guess they felt really sorry for my mum. And then, all of a sudden, this rabbi called Jesus appeared out of nowhere, walked up to my mum and said, "Don't cry." Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think that's the first thing I would say to someone at a funeral, particularly a total stranger. I think I would say something like, "I'm sorry," or "What a shame," or maybe I'd just say nothing at all. But "Don't cry" would be ridiculous. That's exactly how my mum felt. At least that's what she told me. She didn't know whether to ignore him or spit at him or laugh at him or maybe just cry even harder. What she felt like doing was smacking him right across his rabbi face. But instead, She just looked down at the ground and said nothing. You think that would have stopped the rabbi, dropped a hint that she didn't really want him there, that his comment wasn't exactly right for the occasion. But no, he just kept on going. He walked right up to my coffin and put his hand on it, as if he wanted the procession to stop. Well, it stopped all right, mainly because everyone was so offended by what he'd done. I mean, what right did he have to burst into a funeral and disrupt everything? My mum told me that there was a lot of moaning and muttering at that moment, a bit of shouting and swearing too. And apparently, someone had to grab hold of Aaron, our next door neighbour, to keep him from doing what my mum had only thought of doing, and more. So the funeral was just about wrecked. And that's when I, more or less, came back into the picture. You know how it is when you're really, really tired and you fall asleep and you sleep so soundly that the next thing you know, it's morning and you're awake again, as if no time had passed at all. Well, that's how it was. Out of nowhere, I heard these words: "Young man, I say to you, get up." So I did. And seeing as I didn't actually realise that I was dead, I did sort of feel just like I was getting up. Nothing special, nothing unusual. I just opened my eyes and sat up, which was, of course, extremely unusual for the people who were attending the funeral. The swearing turned to swooning, the shouting turned to screaming, and our neighbour Aaron dropped his fists and then fainted and dropped to the ground. It's safe to say that no one in Nain had ever seen anything like this before. I was obviously shocked as well. What was I doing in a coffin? That was the first thing I wanted to know. But when my mum grabbed me and hugged me and started kissing me and telling me how glad she was to have me back, it became apparent that I had missed a pretty significant event in my life, so to speak. She hugged Jesus as well, of course, and had plenty to say to him after that. How grateful she was, how amazed she was, how relieved she was, how good it was of God to finally answer her prayers. That sort of thing. I got a lot of other hugs too. Well, eventually, lots of folk were just a little hesitant about putting their arms around someone who had been a corpse just a few minutes earlier. But they got over it, I guess, and in the end, I stepped out of my coffin and walked away from my funeral. And there aren't many people who can say that. Sad to say, my mum passed away a couple of days ago. We talked a lot before she died, and everything was good. She was so happy and so glad that I could be there to hold her hand. So grateful that she wasn't alone. I asked her if she wanted me to try to find Jesus for her, but she said no. One person raised from the dead is probably more than any family should expect. And if it had to be anyone, she said, I'm glad that it was you. So I'm off to the funeral now. I'm sad, but I'm also sort of glad in a way. Not just that Jesus brought me back to life, but that, in another way, he brought her back to life too. I'm not really expecting him to turn up, but who knows? I think I'll keep an eye out for strangers, just in case. So that's the story of the son who was raised from the dead and was able to spend a lot of time of his life looking after his mum until she died. We assume that the son died again. I'm not aware of him still being alive in Israel now, He'd be over 2,000 years old now. Well, that's the story for this week. I hope you stay safe and God bless you all.